During World War II, a group of Japanese women prisoners of war endure months of starvation in an American POW camp, surviving on meager rations of rice gruel and scraps. When unexpected circumstances lead to the arrival of fresh, properly cooked meals provided by their American captors, the overwhelming aroma triggers a profound psychological and emotional response among the prisoners. The story explores their complex reactions to this sudden glimpse of humanity and normalcy, ranging from desperate hunger and disbelief to painful memories of home, while examining how prolonged deprivation can make even the simplest acts of sustenance feel both miraculous and heartbreaking. The Pacific breeze, usually a welcome reprieve, today carried the pervasive stench of humid salt air mingled with the acrid smell of makeshift latrines and the metallic tang of hunger that permeated everything. This was the landscape of their existence, an American prisoner of war camp carved out of a hostile island jungle. The barracks, flimsy structures of canvas and rough-hewn timber, offered scant protection against the searing daytime heat or the clammy nights. Privacy was a forgotten luxury. Dignity, a whispered memory in hardened hearts. Every day followed a monotonous, cruel ritual. The abrupt awakening before sunrise, the curt roll call, the seemingly trivial tasks designed to occupy their dwindling strength. But the most agonizing ritual was the wait for meals. They shuffled in line, gaunt bodies draped in coarse, ill-fitting garments, for a meager portion of watery rice or, occasionally, an overboiled sweet potato. The act of eating was a somber performance. Each grain of rice was cherished, every morsel chewed with excruciating slowness, a desperate attempt to prolong the fleeting sensation of something in their empty stomachs. The constant pangs of hunger were the relentless drumbeat of their lives, defining every waking moment, every disturbed dream. The Americans never feed the prisoners, was the unspoken truth, a grim collective acceptance that they were expected to survive on the barest thread, perhaps not even that. Emi Tanaka, a schoolteacher from Tokyo in her mid-30s, moved among them with a silent, weary resolution. Her professional composure, once a shield, had deepened into a quiet strength. She observed everything, the dullness in one woman's eyes, the persistent cough in another's chest, the slow, insidious decline of them all. With virtually no medical supplies and dwindling hope, her hands, once so adept at holding books and guiding children, now felt almost useless, able only to offer a gentle touch or a strained, encouraging smile. She carried the unbearable burden of knowing, of seeing, and of being unable to truly help her fellow countrywomen. Akari Sato, a young weaver from Kyoto, barely in her early 20s, seemed to shrink with each passing day. Her physical fragility was mirrored by a deep emotional vulnerability. Her large, dark eyes often appeared distant, retreating into vivid, shimmering memories of home. Her family, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed green tea and perfectly steamed rice in her mother's kitchen, the delicate fragrance of dashi simmering gently on the stove. For Akari, food was not merely sustenance, it was a connection, a culture, a deep-seated memory. Her dreams, when they came, were often of elaborate banquets, tantalizing and torturous in their realism, a solace and a torment all at once. Haruna Suzuki, a middle-aged housewife from a small coastal village, was perhaps the most pragmatic of their group. Hard-bitten by life and the crushing reality of war, she often declared that hope was a luxury they could not afford. "Only what we can see and feel is real," she would rasp, her voice rough with disuse and fatigue. She maintained a rigid control over her feelings, but each passing day saw her body become more a shadow of the robust woman she once was. Around them, other Japanese women existed. An elderly woman who spent her days in a state of near catatonic silence, another whose incessant coughing seemed to rack her entire frail frame, adding to the grim tableau of their shared suffering. Then, a disturbance, almost imperceptible at first. A subtle shift in the American soldiers' patrol patterns, previously so indifferent, almost mechanical. A new recruit, perhaps, a young man whose eyes occasionally flickered with something akin to unease rather than the usual cold detachment. The women noticed, of course. They always noticed. Every minute detail, no matter how small, of their captor's behavior was scrutinized. analyzed and usually dismissed as just another arbitrary peculiarity of the camp, another capricious turn of the screw. Their senses, dulled by hunger and fear, were utterly unprepared to anticipate anything good, anything out of the ordinary, anything that might shatter the brutal consistency of their starvation. It began subtly, an alien aroma, faint at first, easily dismissed as a hallucination or the cruel trick of a starving mind. Emmy, her precise mind, trained to notice every detail, caught it first. It wasn't just the familiar, bland smell of boiling rice, but something richer, deeper, utterly foreign to their camp-bound existence. She sniffed the humid air, trying to identify its components. Is that meat? Spices? Her mind raced through the possibilities, each one more impossible than the last. Her nose, accustomed to only the blandest of odors, struggled to process the unexpected complexity. The scent grew stronger, a savory, complex aroma that simply did not belong here. It was distant, but insistent, weaving its way through the threadbare fabric of their routine. Akari's head tilted, her large, dark eyes widening fractionally, a confused frown etching itself between her brows. She held her breath subconsciously, as if trying to capture and define the elusive fragrance before it vanished, fearing it was merely a cruel illusion. For her, the scent was already a ghost, a half-remembered dream of a world long lost. Haruna, ever the skeptic, inhaled sharply, her gaze sweeping over the other women. They're cooking something special for themselves, the devils, she rasped, her voice thick with conviction. Just a cruel reminder. Don't fall for it. She believed it was a deliberate act of torture, a fresh, exquisite torment. But the smell persisted, growing stronger still, wafting unmistakably through the canvas barracks, past the communal latrines, into every corner of their confined world. It was no longer abstract, no longer a phantom. It was concrete, undeniable. The rich, pungent scent of simmering meat, fragrant herbs, perhaps even roasted vegetables. It was the unequivocal smell of cooked food, food prepared with care, not merely boiled for survival. It was a smell of humanity, of comfort, of a world they had long, long forgotten. A profound silence descended upon the women. Each was consumed by her own interpretation of this impossible sensory input. Their gaunt faces, usually etched with a monotonous weariness, now betrayed a startling mixture of confusion, dawning terror, and a primal, almost painful longing that was both exquisite and excruciating. For Akari, the aroma was a violent assault, an immediate, overwhelming flashback. The very air around her seemed to shimmer, parting to reveal a vivid vision of her mother in their sun-dappled Kyoto kitchen. The rhythmic chop of vegetables, the gentle hiss of steam, the subtle, comforting aroma of miso, and freshly grated ginger filling the air as she prepared a delicate odin. Akari's knees buckled. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down her face, not just from the agony of hunger, but from the acute, visceral pain of lost home, lost comfort, lost innocence. The food was a ghost, a haunting echo of a life brutally severed, a memory too sharp to bear. Haruna clenched her fists until her knuckles cracked. The smell, so potent, so real, felt like a deliberate insult, a calculated act of psychological warfare. It reawakened a deep-seated, simmering rage. Rage at their American captors, at their impossible situation, at the sheer, unadulterated injustice of being denied this basic human need, this fundamental pleasure for so long. They want to tempt us, to break us further, she rasped, her teeth gritted. To show us what we can't have, to rub our noses in their plenty. Emmy, the former teacher, felt a sudden surge of nausea, a physical recoil from the sheer intensity of the aroma. Her stomach, long accustomed to emptiness, rebelled against the phantom richness. But this initial repulsion was quickly followed by an equally powerful, almost terrifying wave of hunger, a raw, animalistic craving that startled her with its intensity. Her scientific, rational mind, trained to analyze and diagnose, clashed violently with her starving body. She tried to rationalize, to find a logical explanation for this anomaly. Perhaps a new, high-ranking American officer had arrived, a special occasion for the guards, but her heart hammered in her chest with a terrifying, forbidden hope, a hope she had long suppressed, fearing its devastating power. Then, the sharp, guttural voice. An American sergeant, a burly man named Miller, known for his unyielding harshness, his face a mask of cold indifference, entered the barracks. His words, clipped and flat, devoid of emotion, sliced through the heavy silence. New rations, hot meal, come to the mess. The words hung in the suffocating air, echoing an impossible truth. Unbelievable, yet undeniably real. They were an earthquake in their predictable world of suffering. The walk to the mess tent was fraught with a new kind of apprehension, a terrifying blend of hope and disbelief. Their bodies, accustomed to the familiar shuffle of despair, now moved with a tentative, almost dreamlike quality. As they rounded the corner, a collective gasp, quickly suppressed, rippled through the women. There it was, not the thin, watery gruel, but a sight almost too vibrant, too real for their dulled senses. Large, steaming pots, overflowing with what could only be described as a stew, chunks of actual meat, clearly visible. Vegetables, their colors still holding true, deep green peas, bright orange carrots, a thick, rich brown broth, promising depth and flavor. There were even slices of what appeared to be real, fresh bread, not the hardtack they occasionally saw. It was abundance. It was nourishment. It was a stark, almost violent contrast to everything they had known for years. The steam rose in fragrant plumes, enveloping them, an almost unbearable assault on their deprived olfactory senses. It was like seeing color for the first time after years spent in a grayscale world. A moment of collective paralysis held them captive. Is it real? Is it a trick? Are we truly worthy of such a feast? Some women simply stared, wide-eyed, unable to process the vision before them. Others burst into silent tears, the shock too profound for coherent thought. Akari's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. Her eyes glazed with a mixture of terror and wonder. Then, as if a dam had broken, the animal instinct took over. A chaotic, desperate scramble erupted, a flurry of pushing and shoving, gaunt hands reaching, clamoring for bowls. Yet, as quickly as it began, it subsided into a stunned, almost reverent silence. Each woman, clutching her bowl, took her portion, her eyes locked on the steaming contents, as if fearing it would vanish if she blinked. Haruna, despite her earlier cynicism, was among the first to push forward. Her eyes, usually hard and wary, now held a primal glint, locked onto the stew. She didn't speak, didn't acknowledge anyone, just moved with a fierce, singular purpose. Akari, however, hesitated, almost afraid to touch the bowl, as if its reality might shatter under her touch. Emmy, ever the observer, watched the scene unfold, her medical instincts screaming caution. Refeeding syndrome, rapid changes, the delicate balance of their starved bodies. Her mind raced even as her own stomach roared in protest. The first spoonfuls, a symphony of textures and tastes, rich, savory, overwhelming. The immediate physical reactions were varied and intense. Some women gagged, their stomachs clenching violently, unaccustomed to such richness. Others trembled uncontrollably, tears streaming down their faces, not from sorrow, but from the sheer, unbearable sensation of taste, of food. Their bodies, long programmed for starvation, struggled to accept this sudden, generous influx of nourishment. Akari ate slowly, each bite a bittersweet memory. The taste evoked the warmth of her mother's kitchen, the comforting rituals of her childhood in Kyoto. The tears flowed freely, a relentless cascade, a mix of pure joy for the food and a profound, aching sorrow for everything lost, for the life that should have been. She described the sensation of warmth spreading through her, a foreign, almost shocking feeling after years of internal coldness. It was a ghost of a meal, haunting and beautiful. Haruna, usually so controlled, devoured her portion with a furious intensity. Her eyes darted around, suspicious, half expecting the bowl to be snatched away, the illusion broken. She ate as if each mouthful was an act of defiance, a reclaiming of her stolen life, her stolen health. Yet, a faint shadow of guilt flickered in her eyes. Why me? Why now? The question, unspoken, hung heavy in the air. Emmy, the pragmatic teacher, ate methodically. Her spoon moved with a deliberate, almost scientific precision. She tried to analyze the ingredients, assessing their nutritional value, mentally calculating the potential impact on their ravaged bodies. She forced herself to eat slowly, fearing the physical repercussions of sudden refeeding, a concept she had dimly recalled from medical texts. But even her professional detachment, her scientific objectivity, could not entirely suppress the sheer, overwhelming goodness of the food. It was a shocking, exquisite contrast to the daily suffering, a fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure that unsettled her. She felt a profound moral conflict. Was it right to enjoy this while so many had suffered and died? Was this a reward, or just another form of torture? A profound silence settled over the mess tent as they ate. It wasn't the silence of fear that they knew so well, but a deeper, more complex quietude, broken only by quiet, choked sobs or soft, almost inaudible murmurs. It was a silence of overwhelming sensory and emotional processing, a collective moment of grappling with the impossible. Afterwards, back in the barracks, whispers filled the air, replacing the usual heavy quiet. Why? What does it mean? Is the war over? Is it a trap? The food had shattered their predictable world of suffering, replacing it with a terrifying, agonizing uncertainty. The miracle continued. The next day, and the next, the improved rations were delivered, hot and plentiful. Slowly, cautiously, the Japanese women began to believe. A tiny, fragile sliver of hope, long extinguished, began to flicker within them. Physical changes, though subtle, became noticeable. A faint, almost imperceptible glow returned to their ashen skin. Their steps, once heavy and dragging, became a little steadier, a fraction lighter. The immediate gnawing threat of starvation receded, replaced by a different, more complex kind of anxiety. This new food, while life-saving, was a double-edged sword. It ripped away the veil of numbness that hunger had provided, brutally reminding them of everything they had lost, of their lives in Japan, of the vibrant culture they knew, of the people they missed. The stark contrast between their former desperate existence and this new, unexpected abundance created a disorienting emotional landscape. Emmy found herself grappling constantly with an ethical dilemma. Is it kinder to be slowly starved to death, fading away in a fog of delirium, or to be brought back to life, to full, excruciating awareness, only to remain a captive of the very people who bombed your homeland? The question gnawed at her, finding no easy answer. In the quiet solitude of her bunk, she began to make small notes in a hidden diary, a tiny, precious book she had managed to conceal. Her observations meticulously documented the physical changes in the women, their cautious reactions, and her own internal turmoil, a silent witness to their complex journey. Akari, with her renewed, albeit fragile energy, found herself drawn back to her art. She began to draw more vividly, no longer just the faded memories of home and comfort, but the food itself, in all its detail, the textures, the colors, the steam rising from the bowls. She sketched the ingredients, those she could now identify, using her unique artistic style to reclaim beauty and process her trauma through the act of creation. It was her way of asserting control, of finding a small pocket of solace in the new, disorienting reality. She even attempted to compose haiku in her mind, finding beauty in the most unexpected places. Haruna, though still outwardly cynical, used her newfound energy to enforce a stricter sense of order within their barracks. She was fiercely protective, demanding fairness in chores, distributing the meager scraps of amenities, and subtly looking out for the weaker ones. The food had restored some of her formidable spirit, channeling it into a renewed dedication to their collective survival. She would even sometimes utter a sharp, defiant word to the American guards, testing the boundaries of their new reality. The American guards remained largely unchanged, their faces often impassive masks. They offered no explanation for the improved food, no words to accompany the dramatic shift in policy. Their silence was as inscrutable as their previous cruelty. Yet occasionally, Emmy noticed a subtle difference. The young recruit, the one whose eyes had seemed less detached, sometimes cast quick, almost sympathetic glances at the women, or abruptly avoided their gaze. This fleeting hint of humanity, however small, created further confusion among the Japanese prisoners, adding another layer of unsettling ambiguity to their already precarious situation. Then came a minor incident, a small spark that illuminated the deeply ingrained fear of scarcity. A bowl of the precious stew, accidentally jostled, spilled onto the dirt floor. Or perhaps a small, coveted portion of a vegetable was found missing from a communal serving. The reaction was disproportionate, a sudden, almost primal explosion of fear, anger, and immediate accusations among the Japanese women. The incident revealed how deeply ingrained the scarcity mentality remained, a haunting ghost of their recent past, despite the continued abundance of food. Emmy, her teacher's composure momentarily strained, stepped in to mediate, gently reminding them of their shared humanity, of the progress they had made. Haruna, her voice unusually stern, enforced the unwritten law. Every crumb was sacred. The incident underscored the fragile nature of their nascent hope, a delicate flower blooming in the harsh soil of their captivity. Weeks bled into months. The Japanese women were undeniably physically stronger. Their bones no longer jutted so sharply beneath their skin. Their eyes held a little more light, and their movements were less laborious. Yet the psychological effects of the past years, compounded by the sudden dramatic change in their circumstances, were profound and pervasive. The stark contrast between their improved physical state and the grim, unyielding reality of their imprisonment was sharper than ever. The taste of good food, once an impossible dream, now carried a heavy, almost unbearable weight. It was a constant, cruel reminder of their captivity, of their lives in Japan, of the vibrant culture they knew, of the people they missed. The stark contrast between their former desperate existence and this new, unexpected abundance created a disorienting emotional landscape. Emmy, despite the continued adequate rations, found herself meticulously rationing her own food, unable to shake the deeply ingrained fear of scarcity. The instinct to hoard, to conserve, was still a powerful subconscious command even when abundance lay before her. She observed Akari, now healthier, often weeping silently over her meals, her tears falling into the savory broth, a testament to the bittersweet nature of her memories. Haruna, though physically robust, seemed to have grown even more vigilant, her gaze constantly sweeping their surroundings, as if guarding against an invisible threat to their newfound survival, a premonition of loss. The improved health spurred a cautious resurgence of conversation within the barracks. Shared dreams, tentatively whispered, now replaced the resigned silence. Even fragile plans for a future in Japan, once unthinkable, began to take shape. But beneath this surface of renewed activity, the trauma of their past simmered, a constant, low-burning fire. Some women struggled with profound survivor's guilt, haunted by the faces of those who had not made it this far. Others lived in perpetual fear that this too, this fleeting period of relative comfort, would be snatched away, leaving them once again adrift in a sea of despair. Akari, her spirit blossoming with renewed strength, found purpose in her art. Her drawings, once confined to her own imagination, now depicted the faces of the women around her, their gaunt features softened by small acts of kindness, their eyes reflecting the complex emotions of survival. She captured their strength, their sorrow, their enduring spirit, hoping to preserve their stories, to give them a tangible form that starvation could not erase. She even began to teach simple traditional Japanese songs, or tell stories from their homeland, channeling her deep emotional wellspring into nurturing the fragile community. Haruna, her voice now stronger, used it to quietly challenge the American guards on small injustices, empowered by her returning physical strength. She subtly, carefully, tested the boundaries of their new reality, pushing for small gains in their collective dignity. Emmy, the unofficial medic, observed that while overt physical ailments like scurvy and beriberi were visibly receding, a new host of psychological symptoms emerged. Anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress became more pronounced. The body might heal, but the mind, now unburdened by the immediate threat of starvation, struggled with the raw, unfiltered return of sensibility, of painful memory. Rumors, like tendrils of smoke, began to curl through the camp. New batches of Japanese prisoners, arriving from other even more desolate locations, whispered fragmented news of Allied advances, of battles turning in their favor, of the growing desperation in Japan. Or perhaps an American guard, less hardened than Sergeant Miller, inadvertently let slip a remark about the end or impending inspections by the Red Cross. The women, starved for information as much as for food, devoured these fragments, piecing them together into a chaotic tapestry of hope and fear. They speculated endlessly about the reasons for the sudden, inexplicable generosity with food. Was it a sign of impending liberation? A desperate attempt by the Americans to improve their appearance for propaganda photos? A cynical attempt to fatten them up for an exchange? Or was it a genuine, albeit small, gesture of changing tides, of a war shifting irrevocably towards its conclusion? The ambiguity itself became a new form of torment, an excruciating, seesawing dance between unbearable hope and paralyzing terror. The air shimmered with an unusual tension, a mixture of foreboding and a strange, almost festive excitement. It was the anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, a day usually marked by increased vigilance from the American guards and subdued fear among the Japanese prisoners. But today, the mess tent buzzed with a different kind of energy. The meal, they quickly discovered, was not just improved, it was exceptional. Perhaps a rare delicacy for American soldiers, or simply a portion so generous it bordered on excessive. It was a feast, symbolizing either a profound gesture of humanity or a final cynical manipulation, a cruel theatrical performance by their captors. As the women gathered, bowls in hand, the profound irony and tragedy of their situation descended upon them with crushing weight. The delicious aroma, the comforting warmth of the food instead of bringing simple joy, triggered a torrent of complex, overwhelming emotions. It was too much. Emmy, standing in the queue, felt a cold dread creep into her stomach, a sensation far more potent than hunger. As she looked at the food, steaming and rich, she saw not just nourishment, but a terrifying symbol. A symbol of all they had lost, all they had endured, all the dignity brutally stripped away. A silent, profound scream began to build within her, a raw, primal cry that encompassed years of suffering, the countless lives lost, the quiet atrocities committed by both sides. She could barely lift her spoon, her hand trembling. The very act of eating felt like a betrayal, a surrender to a twisted reality. Akari, her face pale, began to sing, a soft, mournful enka from her distant homeland, a lament of loss and longing, a folk song whispered from her heart. Her voice, thin but clear, floated through the mess tent, carrying an ancient collective sorrow. Other women, their own emotions raw and exposed, quietly joined in, a spontaneous, heartbreaking chorus of grief and memory. The rich, steaming food sat before them, untouched by many, a focal point for their shared, unbearable trauma. Haruna, the cynical realist, surprised them all. Instead of eating, instead of even looking at the food, she slowly, deliberately, pushed her untouched bowl forward, away from her, letting it slide to the edge of the table. It was not an act of rejection of the food itself. She coveted it as much as any of them. It was a silent, powerful act of defiance, a tribute to those who had not survived to see this day, who had died hungry and broken. Her eyes, usually so sharp and guarded, were now filled with unshed tears, glistening. They met Emmy's gaze across the room, a silent, profound acknowledgement of their shared, unbearable burden, a moment of deep, wordless understanding. Sergeant Miller, the American guard who had first announced the change in rations, stood near the entrance observing the scene. His face remained a mask of indifference, yet Emmy noticed a subtle shift, a flicker, a fleeting moment of something akin to understanding, perhaps even shame, in his otherwise cold eyes. For an instant, he seemed to acknowledge their humanity, their suffering, before he abruptly turned away, his back to them, resuming his robotic patrol. No explanation was offered for the food, no words were exchanged. The why remained unspoken, a profound void that each woman was left to fill with her own terrifying, ambiguous understanding. The silence, in that moment, spoke volumes more than any words could. The exceptional meal marked a profound turning point, though no one articulated it. The food continued to be adequate, hot, and relatively plentiful, maintaining the bewildering new normal. But the Japanese women themselves were fundamentally changed. The initial shock had given way to a deeper, more nuanced understanding of their survival. A complex tapestry woven from gratitude, resentment, and an enduring sense of profound loss. Emmy, the former teacher, continued to document, her hidden diary now filled with more than just observations of camp life. Her cramped handwriting chronicled reflections on memory, on resilience, on the fragile and often contradictory meaning of humanity in the face of inhumanity. Each entry was an attempt to make sense of the senseless, to record a truth that felt too vast to comprehend. Akari, her spirit blossoming with renewed strength, found purpose in her art. Her drawings, once confined to her own imagination, now depicted the faces of the women around her, their gaunt features softened by small acts of kindness, their eyes reflecting the complex emotions of survival. She captured their strength, their sorrow, their enduring spirit, hoping to preserve their stories to give them a tangible form that starvation could not erase. She also led quiet sessions, sharing traditional Japanese songs and stories, helping to keep their cultural identity alive. Haruna, the hardened realist, dedicated herself to the quiet, unglamorous work of caring for the weakest among them. She ensured they ate, that they rested, that they did not succumb to the despair that still lurked at the edges of their existence. It was a fierce, quiet form of love, a profound demonstration of solidarity born from shared suffering. Then, the long-awaited day finally arrived. The camp, once a symbol of their endless captivity, was suddenly miraculously overrun by American soldiers, not as captors, but as liberators from the war itself. The transition to repatriation was disorienting, overwhelming, a chaotic explosion of sound and light as they boarded ships bound for Japan. The women were physically freed, but the psychological chains remained, invisible yet binding. The first food offered after the camp, perhaps a bland, simple meal on a ship heading home, tasted different now. It lacked the shocking intensity, the almost painful richness of the camp's good food. Instead, it carried the taste of unconditional nourishment, of safety, of a future no longer defined by the ever-present shadow of hunger. Years later, back in Japan, wherever they found themselves, Emmy, Akari, and Haruna carried the indelible mark of that smell. The aroma of fresh cooked food from the American internment camp was forever etched in their minds, a complex memory of both a cruel game and an unexpected lifeline. It was a potent reminder of the brutal depths of human cruelty, of the casual indifference to suffering that had almost consumed them. But it was also a testament to the incredible stubborn resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that could find a flicker of hope even in the darkest of places. That smell, that memory, became a constant echo of a time when the simplest act of being fed had been the most profound, the most shocking, and ultimately, the most transformative event of their lives. Deprivation, they understood, amplified the significance of everything. The food in its unexpected arrival didn't just fill their bellies, it filled them with questions, with memories, with a redefined sense of what it meant to be truly alive. The smell of fresh food shocked the Japanese women POWs, became a poignant, enduring testament, not just to starvation, but to the shocking, agonizing, and ultimately redemptive power of its sudden, bewildering reversal.